Hey YouTube! So, as the title suggests, I have a kind of announcement to make, but also a little story to go along with it. So, I feel like I need to preface this somewhat, especially for folks who don't know me to understand the significance of the thing. So, I think the best way to start is to tell you a little bit about some of the stuff that's been coming up for me in my tarot and astrology practice, and how I kind of didn't know what was coming, or kind of dismissed some pretty obvious signs, and then suddenly it was like everything in my life is changing at once. So in December especially, I noticed I had been pulling a lot of tens, I've been pulling the world, so like a lot of cards that kind of indicate ends of cycles. Also, like, the cards I think of as kind of mastery cards, so like Eight of Pentacles, King of Pentacles, like all this stuff that was like, okay, like end of something, or like pinnacle of something, which made, like, more or less made sense, because I feel like very much like that in my career, like I've reached a place of security, and not necessarily like terminal level, but the highest title that I really want to have in life. And I'm only 34. So definitely feeling like that in my career. Also feeling like relatively content and happy, sort of like very secure, very settled in where I am. And I was feeling that way, and which is fine. But also kind of different for me, because I think I have been pretty ambitious in life. Like, very, like, what's the next step? What's the next step? In school, and then in work, it's like, what's the next step? And I've noticed that changing. I talked to this channel about how 2019 for me was kind of a little bit of a slow year, because I had so little energy because of health stuff, and like little motivation, and I was feeling like the energy kind of coming back during my sabbatical, but also kind of not knowing exactly what I was going to do with it. And I remember, like, I took, for example, Lindsay Mack and Amy Koretsky's Tarot for Underworld course, and it was like, yeah, this totally resonates. I think I'm on an underworld journey. Like, I'm coming into a hermit year. I feel like it's just, I'm like ready to sit in discomfort and like not know what's next, and like not have a lot happen. Sit in the discomfort of inaction. And that was all that I was expecting things to be. I was like, I'm not gonna know. It's gonna feel too slow. I felt for a while, I felt for 2019 that way, and I'm like, it's gonna keep happening. I just have to lean into it. And I was all ready to lean into it. And the other thing I'd been pulling a lot was the Strength card reversed. And I wasn't really sure why. And then in December, I was doing a lot of personal work, around shadow work around my just stuff. And I realized suddenly, I had this moment of clarity around the Strength card being reversed, and I was like, oh, I think what this is actually referring to, and what I couldn't connect to, is my reluctance to admit to myself some fears I have, particularly some fears around, like, I'm afraid to admit that I want to be cared for. I'm afraid to, like, trust when people offer to care for me, and then I'm afraid to admit that I want care or nurturing, because of a whole lot of shit that's for my therapist's ears only. But, you know, it's a problem. I've talked on this channel about my kind of shadows around generosity, and I have, like, fears that that I'm not generous enough, but also that, like, if I try to rely on people because I'm not generous enough, I won't have enough value to them in a relationship. Like, there's all this stuff that I was digging into, and realizing that my, like, blocks around it was why I wasn't seeing what Strength reversed was. And once I started engaging with it, it was like, oh, that makes sense. So around the turn of the year, I noticed that I was getting the Fool. I also noticed I was getting the Tower, and I was like, what? I don't I mean, you never want to ignore the tower when it comes up, but I got it several times and I was like, what is this referring to? I have no idea. And I've gotten the tower before, like when I was in the midst of an obvious tower, but I hadn't really gotten it like multiple times when I wasn't sure why. I'm like, this is suspicious, but it's like maybe it's just, but my guess was it was coming up reversed, and my guess was like, oh, maybe it's just like an internal tower, and it's like around some of the like self work I've been doing. And so it's a baby tower. It could be a baby tower, that's fine. It was not a baby tower, spoiler alert. But yeah, and then astrologically, you could watch my video about this, but I talked a little bit about. I have a couple of videos about this actually. I'll try to put them in cards, but I've talked about all the Capricorn shit that's happening, and I talked about my own Capricorn shit, and so maybe that's all in one video. Anyway, my Capricorn is 7th house, so my Capricorn is the house of serious, committed relationships, and so the theme for me for 2019-2020 is all about structures of how I relate to people, how I form committed relationships, how I am in those. And there had definitely been noticeable stuff. I got into a new relationship towards the beginning of this year, which sort of evolved into a relationship with 2 people who were also together. And I was like, okay, I think this is what this is referring to, And I feel like it's kind of settling now. And all right, I think I got it. It relates to those fears I was talking about. Like I'm getting more comfortable maybe a little bit with relying on people, which is true, but I did not know what was to come. Anyway, so that was all happening. We were coming up on this eclipse on the 10th, and then the Saturn-Pluto conjunction on the 12th. And I won't talk about it a lot, but basically those are 2 really, really major things that were happening in that area. And also Cancer, Capricorn, opposite one another. Cancer, home, security, like family, and sorry, I'm doing like a house and a sign. I'm not doing it exactly right. Like for me, it's 1st house and 7th house. So it's self and relationships, and then Cancer and Capricorn. So you've got security, home, comfort, Cancer, and then you've got Capricorn is like structure, and this doesn't play in as much, but structure, responsibility. So you have these like themes being activated really heavily. And I was thinking like, I don't know that like normally the eclipses, the Cancer moon and rising hit me really hard, but I was kind of like, I mean, I'm sort of feeling it generally, but I don't think anything major is going to happen right around the eclipse. Never say that. Never say that. So I got some kind of shocking, kind of scary health news. It is not 100% confirmed yet. I'm also probably not going to talk about it in detail on this channel, even if it is confirmed, because I'm a little concerned about some of the health privacy stuff and the implications of that. So if I have to talk about it, I will probably talk about it in a generic sort of chronic illness as a category way, like I have before. Please don't worry too much. If it is what I think it is treatable, but it's just, it would be a really big deal to change my life. So I was going through that panic attack, and I realized that I immediately went to a few people, 2 of whom are these people that I'm in a relationship with, who live on the other side of the country. And so I was talking to them, and they immediately jumped to like, what can I do? How can I take care of you? And my fear was because of some things around the treatment that I was like, oh shit, this could fuck up my whole relationship. Like, I'm not going to be able to travel the way I used to. I can't spend as long out there. And I was telling them this, and first of all, they're like, whatever, like, we can come to you, like, we're going to troubleshoot it. But it was also like, oh, but what could you get the treatment here? And I'm like, well, I don't think I could split the treatment between coasts. And they're like, no, but like, could you? And it was kind of like, they had been joking a little, one of them had been joking a little bit about like, oh, what if you move across the country? And I'm like, haha. And it was always, the funny thing was, I realized now in hindsight that, looking back at texts and stuff, that actually, like, right on the first, I brought it up, like, not prompted, but I kept saying, like, oh, like, I love you and this, but, like, I'm not going to move across the country, right? Not prompted. So now I'm like, well, that was denial. And so this started coming up, and it was like, that's crazy, I can't do that, can I? Can I? And so this idea of moving totally disentangled itself from the health thing, because it was like, whatever the outcome, it was like it kicked my ass into gear. And suddenly I'm very detail oriented, as viewers will know, and so I jumped into like, okay, but like let me confirm my assumptions. Like, here's the reasons that I didn't want to move. So like, let me check into all of these reasons, and let me do all the math. Like, of course, the first thing I jumped to was like, are there apartments with XYZ criteria in this area? So I'm going through all these like practical things in the period of like 48 hours. I'm just like boom, 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 like researching things, like details, focus, like could it happen? Could it? And very, very quickly it was like, fuck, I think I'm moving to Seattle. So much love for Catherine at Hypatia Tarot. We were talking about this, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but there's something, and she just casually goes, when you live in Seattle, and I was like, haha, when? Because at the time we were talking, I was like, I'm considering this is crazy, I'm not going to do this, right? And I was like, I mean, I could maybe do it next year, which would be really early, though, and I was like, oh, I can't let my roommates down and move, like, in a year, like, that doesn't give them a lot of time, blah, blah, blah. And it's cheesy to say the stars aligned, but I guess the stars aligned. The more I talked about it, the more I was like, shit, like, I think I want to do this. I've had this deep admiration for spontaneous people all my life. People who, like, take an adventure and do it. So my best friend, Emily, in high school was like this and really, like, taught me this, but I couldn't really grasp it. I never really, like, had that level of spontaneity. Another dear friend, Lena, same way, is just like, we'll just do an adventure, and I'm like, oh, I want to be a person who does an adventure. And one of the two people in Seattle, whose names I won't mention because I haven't asked them, but and because I might talk about this more on this channel, but one of them is very much like an adventure person and like a kind of not spark joy, not like Marie Kondo, but just like follow your joy kind of person, and very into like, how do you follow your joy, which is really attractive to me. And I realized, like, talking to her and talked to both of them, I was like, yeah, it's like, do the thing. Lindsay Mack, in one of her courses, talking about the Fool, talks about how there's this idea of a leap with the Fool, but it's not really a leap because the ground underneath you is an illusion. The idea that you're standing on a cliff and then there's a chasm is an illusion. You're always walking on air. You never know what's next. And I hope it's okay to give that away. You should absolutely pay for it if you can. Take this course, terror for what it is. It is changing my life, like, actively. The lessons on the Fool are, like, actually a big part of how I was able to do this. And having a teacher who's gone through the health stuff that Lindsay has, and seeing, her journey is also, like, how I'm getting through these health things. But yeah, so I thought about that so much. It's like, there's no ground. And how much, like, I'm very Cancer in that, like, security is really important to me, safety is important to me, like, physical surroundings. Like, I love this, see my name and my art all around. Like, I love this room. I love my pink and orange, everywhere. And so I get really attached to my little shell, my little cocoon. And so the idea of moving anywhere, for me, I was planning on moving 3 to 4 years, so the idea of moving, like, next year was like, shit. And the idea of moving across the country, especially, I've never lived on the West Coast. The furthest I've lived, I'm not sure which is further, is either Iowa City or Cork, Ireland, probably about the same. Those are the furthest I lived from the East Coast, so I've never lived on the West Coast. I think of myself as a very East Coast person. That was one of the little excuses that I sort of worked through, and was like, that's a silly thing to say. Like, you're an East Coast person, what does that even mean? Anyway, so I was, in this place of being like, like, it's true, like, you take the next step. It's not helpful necessarily to cling to the cliff instead of jumping, because the cliff isn't secure. Like, any day I could lose my job, I could lose my housing situation. Like, I have a tremendous amount of privilege, and I think that is why I'm able to believe in the ground. People who have less privilege are aware that there is no ground. But we have this false sense of security that comes from privilege, that comes from a financial privilege, and I just realized, like, you know, if it doesn't work out, like, then move again. Like, it's it's fine, you know. But you have to, like, take these leaps, and my heart is so much calling. So I've also been getting the Lover's card, which makes me think of just this, like, mirror, the idea of, like, admiring all these spontaneous people and being like, oh, that's in me. Like, I have that in me. I just don't want to recognize it. And then pulling cards related to, like, home, relationship, security, like pulling fours, pulling just different things where it's like, oh, I didn't know what that was referring to. And also several astrologers have actually been talking this year about the Emperor. Well, Lindsay's been talking about the Emperor year. Astrologers have been talking about astrology, but several people have mentioned the possibility of a move, that you should think about where you're in the right place. And I just completely ignored it. I'd be like, oh, that's not relevant to me, right? You know, I mean, certainly not in 2020. Like, I have a apartment I like, I have a life I like. Ignore the moving stuff, all those messages. Don't ignore the messages. This is so ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, so many signs, so many things are just pointing to this. And I wouldn't make a decision just because of the signs, but, like, I feel very supported and very, like, right in this. And I feel like it's time for me to take a leap of the heart, a leap of faith that is scary to me, and particularly scary because I think of myself as, like, my worth in relationships coming from my independence and my ability to adult, and my sort of, like, I'm easy, right? Like, I'm an easy person to be in a relationship with because I don't have a lot of strings. But constructing that, like, it's like, how much of that is true? I think some of it is, and some of it I think is constructed. And so, like, it's scary, and it's a big deal for me to, like, kind of trust fall into the universe and allow people, when people say they want to take care of me, to be like, that is a thing I really want. Yes, thank you. Like, it is surprisingly hard to say yes to something that someone is offering you that you want. And I think especially there's a lot of, like, Southern cultural stuff around this where, like, we don't say it. There's this whole social script around not accepting things, and I think it's really harmful. Like, I think I'm good at communication, but I'm realizing how difficult it is for me it's easier for me to say what I need. It's not easy for me to accept when somebody says, okay, great, here it is. So that's kind of what I'm doing. So one more thing that all the kind of university aligning stuff is that I was saying, oh, I can't do this to my roommates. I can't move as soon as next year. It's going to be a big deal. And long story short, it turns out that they had been trying to figure out buying a house and some other stuff in the future, and, like, some of the details of their living situation. And they were afraid of things happening too early for me. So the conclusion is, I am moving to Seattle, probably in April or May of this year, of 2020, of this lovely Emperor year we are all in. I'm moving across the country. That is what I'm doing. That is the space I'm taking up. That is the thing I'm claiming. That is the thing I'm choosing over fear. And it's still terrifying, but it's more exciting than it is terrifying. And it's so many things feel right. Things keep dropping into place still, like, you know, with all the details because of course I packed up, like, half my shit. Like, I'm so details. I have multiple spreadsheets dedicated to this move. But it's a thing. It's happening. So that's my big announcement. I don't know. This will likely come out after I've announced on other social media, because I'm trying not to post things during 31 Days of Tarot. So this will come out after. I'll probably post it in February as soon as I can find a spot in my editorial calendar. It'll probably happen before my birthday. I'm having a big 35th birthday thing that I may record some footage of, depending on how people feel about it. But I'll at least probably update you on it. And then I'm going to pre-record as much as I can, but it is possible that, especially around April, May, depending on the move date, there may be some lag. There may be some weeks where I have 1 or 0 videos. I hope you will all understand. Even though it's not, like, I'm not hiring movers, like, I'm just leaving a lot of my stuff here. You know, so it's just hopping on a plane with 3 suitcases tugging along. But it still there'll be a lot of stuff going on. I have to buy a car. I have to, like, do all this crap. I have to furnish an apartment. I have to buy food. All the things you do when you move. So please have grace and understanding if I'm not posting a lot. And it's just so nice to be able to like finally share this. I wanted to make sure it was confirmed fully before I did share it, but like, never say that a fucking eclipse is not going to do anything. Never say that all the signs in the universe are probably not important. Here we are. So much love. I already mentioned I'm Catherine. I want to say a special shout out to Catherine, who has been an amazing support in all this, and several other people in my life have just like really stepped up and again like made me see that like you have to reach out to people when they're offering it, you know, when they're consenting and when they're offering to take care of you or to support you or to provide guidance, you know. Do that thing. So that's it from me. I'll see some of you, hopefully in March, at the Northwest Tarot Symposium. Ironically, I'm flying to Portland and then back because I won't have moved yet. So I have 2 cross-country flights to the Pacific Northwest in the period between now and when I actually move. So that's just how that's going to be. If you're in, by the way, the Pacific Northwest, I know very few people there. I know a couple, so I'm not like totally isolated, but a little bit of the scary part is actually going to an area of the country where I know no one. So if you're in Seattle, or even if you're in Portland or Vancouver, I'm going to have a car. I'm going to get a hybrid. Gas will be cheap. I'd love to come visit you wherever you may be. I like driving, so yeah, let me know in the comments below, or you can DM me on Instagram if you don't want people to know your location. So oh, did I cover everything? I think I covered everything. So this may be one of the last times you're actually like seeing, well, besides the pre-recorded stuff, seeing my lovely room in Maryland, as it is with all the art up. I'm gonna take most of the art with me, but not the Avery sticker. The Avery, none of you will know who I am in future videos. There won't be my name behind my head, so you're just gonna have to look below for my name. And I have no idea what it's going to cost to ship that Queer the Binary art that is bleeding pink paint, but I'm going to need to figure that out because that is a cherished thing. Yeah, so that's that. I don't normally ramble this long about personal stuff, so if you want to hear about other things, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. And leave a comment. Let me know how the beginning of your 2020 is going. Is it as ridiculous as mine? I don't know. If you can beat it, please leave me a comment. All right. Bye, everyone.